Just 1 second. And go. Dave.
Good afternoon. This is David Perlman and
Heather Cox.
Heather Cox today at MS Office Hours. Today is the July 23rd.
Yes.
I got it right this time. Excellent. And with us today is Ben Welte. He will be discussing school data sync. And if you'd like to give your title, Ben, really appreciate you coming on. And he works, I believe, in the product group as a customer success manager, I believe. And I got that wrong, didn't I?
No, there's too many acronyms or names. Just it's a nice way of saying I'm responsible to make sure you guys and gals are able to deploy SDS correctly.
Awesome.
Well, I know there's already questions and people are excited about it. So
that's good. That's good. I have a lot of material I'd like to cover here today. So if I'm not answering your questions right away, please understand it's not for a lack of wanting to. I will get to every single one of those.
So
but
yeah,
I'm
well,
very
hey,
excited.
so Ben, I'll say to the group then, let's hold the questions till the end so we can fly through things. And then if need be, we can get questions at the end and then follow-up questions if we don't get to everything.
Yep.
Perfect.
So I understand that there's a group of folks here that have SDS and there's some that don't. So if I'm talking about SDS, assuming that you have it already, please know that I'll go back and forth. But again, hi everyone, my name is Ben Welte. I'm part of the deployment customer success team for EDU global deployments of school data sync and a bunch of other additional EDU services. Today I'm talking about SDS or school data sync in particular. We have a lot of great new features that are being released, and we have some updates that we're pushing out starting this month and into the next month to help with back to school. So just as a quick item I like to highlight here is we're looking at a roadmap for back to school to make sure that you all are prepped for success to use SDS in a manner that will help you have the best deployment possible. So when I'm putting a T-minus roadmap scheduling out there, I'm looking at 2 to 3 weeks before school starts is when we should really be having that school data sync discussion. I'm not going to go into detail of all this because I'll make sure my deck and all my information is readily available to everybody in the call here. But we really should be having that conversation now. And the biggest things that you can be doing is considering, is your data ready? Do you have user and rostering information? Well, let's take a quick step back and talk about what is SDS. SDS is a free service that we offer that brings your school and rostering data directly into Office 365. And I've highlighted here some of the big highlights of the service, the big above the fold lines that are great. It's from creating groups and class teams and OneNote class notebooks based off your rostering data automatically, and being able to manage those rosterings, those users coming in and out as you have that change and churn at the beginning of the year. SDS can help manage that for you. So the teachers don't have to spend time doing that. They can spend more time with collaborating and doing remote, digital, or hybrid learning. We also are able to set up administrative units for delegated rights so that teacher can reset a password for a student if necessary, rather than queuing up a ticket for the IT staff. SDS helps streamline Intune for Education deployment. So if you're having a one-to-one initiative or a BYOD for your devices or any other type of mobile device initiative, SDS helps make that happen a lot quicker. We also can create the users on your behalf for your IT staff. So if you're just new to the cloud environment or you're needing to upload a bunch of users, SDS can come into play and help you with that. And then Grade Sync Write Back for assignments. That's a great feature where teachers are having to create assignments within teams and they have a separate grade notebook that they track all the grades. SDS has some features that can allow you to write all those grades back to your respected gradebook or SIS. We have digital engagement coming soon, which is some fantastic system analytics and class insights showing how users are utilizing the data. If there's any discrepancies or anybody's not able to access it, these reporting mechanisms can highlight what's being used, what's not, by a school, teacher, or even an individual user, or even on the app itself. Then we have Parent Guardian Sync. This is a fantastic option directly within Teams that SDS helps by enabling teachers to notify parents and guardians of a weekly assignments. And then, of course, Security Group creation. Any IT administrator here should hopefully know that security groups are a wonderful tool to utilize for a wide swath of administrative needs, and SDS can auto-create those groups on your behalf. So at a very high level, this is what the architecture, if you will, of SDS looks like from a single SIS student information system, taking students, teachers, the sections, the rosters, the class rostering, the school rostering, the schools themselves, and writing it directly into Azure AD and Office 365 for you. So you can have Intune, Groups, OneNote, Microsoft Teams, all that readily enabled. And that actually brings me to my next point of why SDS is brought into the conversation, is because it can quickly enable Microsoft Teams for your teachers. Otherwise, you're going to have the teachers manually create their class teams, and they have to set the rosters, they have to add users, remove users. SDS will auto-create that and manage those for you. And then, of course, for Intune, I mentioned that previously. With SDS, we can use our security groups that we have created and the groups that are generated by your rostering data to set up unique policies, device-based policies that can be leveraged within Intune. You want to prevent certain users from turning on the webcam on devices, you can do that. Or if you wanted to go the long route, you can have the IT admin create the security groups themselves, but let's make it a little bit easier on their lives by utilizing SDS, right? Now, there's two real big motions when we look at SDS. There's the ability to create users. So all you that haven't utilized SDS today or have an Office 365 footprint, you can use SDS to really establish that beachhead, if you will. Or we can evolve the users that you already have in Azure AD by adding in the rostering, the schools, the grades, the titles, all that additional information directly into the system for you. Even if you're connected and generating your users from an on-prem Active Directory to the cloud, we can help with that. And there is a wide swath of providers, SIS, ISVs, and utilities that we work with. This is just highlighting some of the big ones. You know, we have PowerSchool, Infinite Campus, Capita Sims, Aries. We also can work with anybody that manages their SIS in a one roster API standard. Or if you want complete and utter control, you can also use CSV files. There are only 6 CSV files that are needed to make SDS work. And those can be generated pretty quickly out of most SIS providers. In fact, the way that we've developed the system is so that it's fairly turnkey for you to generate those files. And then I mentioned the parent guardian sync. I wanted to take a moment to talk about that, as I've had some questions in the past, and I just wanted to provide some clarity on that, as it is a service that we help enable within Teams. We're not creating the parents and guardians as users in the system. We're actually creating them as additional substrated data points underneath the students themselves. So when we offer the ability to sync parent and guardian information, we're not creating the users. We're just creating them as additional contacts, if you will, for that particular student. And then I wanted to talk about security groups. The security groups, I've also had a lot of questions on of what can we do with that from a end user perspective. How does this impact teachers? And I wanted to highlight a couple scenarios here of how we can leverage security groups that are generated by SDS. A big one is managing the apps that your students will have access to. Third-party apps that are not within the Microsoft Store, or just making sure that, let's say the users and the students in 7th, 8th, and 9th can only access certain apps, but my users in 10th, 11th, and 12th can have complete access to download whatever app. That is a big tool that's being leveraged by a lot of school districts and higher ed and ministries of education around the world. Another big one I like to highlight is the self-service password reset capability. I don't know about anybody here that's from the IT world that's having to deal with password resets. That can take up a good chunk of your day, especially at the beginning of the year. By having this enabled, you can help alleviate some of the work and overhead on your IT staff, or you can even allow the teachers to have the ability to manage the passwords for the students in their group. Now I'm going to take a quick moment here to see, is there any hands that are raised that I'm missing here right away?
No, currently no hands raised. I do know that there are some, you may get to them. There are some questions that we'll come back to hopefully, but yeah, for right now, it does not look like we have, or wait, I have a hand up now. Or wait, no, maybe it went away. All right, so keep going.
All right. And I'm going at a good clip because I do want to take some time to have your questions and answer them, but I really wanted to get to some of the considerations that we should have when you're looking at deploying, especially for back to school. And then I really want to take some time to talk about our roadmap. There's some really exciting items that we're releasing at the end of next week. So if you are considering to deploy SDS, I'm not going to go through all these questions, but one of the big ones that you should be asking is, do you have data that's ready for that? Do you have a very old, aging SIS provider or a SQL database that is just archaic and is really bloated with a bunch of data from the last 10, 15 years? Then it may be a wise first step to do some hygiene in there first before considering SDS. Or another big key question that I like to ask is, what is it that you want to accomplish? Why are you wanting to use SDS? Is it for Teams? Is it for Intune? Or is it to generate users? Having a clear idea of what your goals are will help make the sync very successful. And we have a dedicated team that provides white glove service to help you hand in hand throughout the entirety of the deployment process. Now, as far as roadmaps and things that I'm very excited about, for July, we're releasing some advanced error reporting updates to make our system smarter and faster. We're able to reduce the amount of cascading errors that can impact your sync. What I'm meaning by this is previously SDS would generate an error for each user that failed to sync, and then any of the associated errors would also cause a mark against your system. What we're doing now is making our sync smarter by generating just the single top level error. The other big item
Ben, somebody muted you. So you have to unmute yourself. There we go.
Sorry about that. I have the
Okay.
presentation on once. So I talked about error reporting. I'm going to talk about performance. You got to get to hear that again. If you already heard part of it, tough. Because it's really important. We've increased the speed of which we're running our SDS. Prior to the big influx that we had in the COVID deployments that we saw that were coming in March, we were at a certain speed that we really needed to up. We needed to boost it up so that we can handle the scale of large ministries, Department of Educations, and just everybody around the world that's needing to get online for digital and remote learning. We're very happy and proud to say by the end of this month, we're increasing the speeds 2, 3, 4 times fold across our user sync, our licensing, membership sync, and group sync. We're even increasing the ability for team sync to process even faster, 75,000 plus teams per day per sync profile. That is a massive increase from where we were just a few short months ago. One of the other items that I'll highlight briefly here is that we also have a new file format for syncing SDS, a simplified version for organizations that need to have a more detailed or user role options for their students, their teachers. This is a great feature for higher ed or ministries of education, and I'll go into that a little bit further, but over here is a nice little preview of the 4 different files underneath our V2 release. The big one I like to mention here today is that we're bringing back Teamify, or team creation. For each class synchronized in SDS, it will once again automatically create both the Office 365 group and the class team. So your educators don't have to do that. They don't have to hit a toggle to say create this class. They don't have to choose which ones they want. We will automatically create it. Now we're going to keep this feature as an optional set when you're creating your back to school profiles so that you have a choice if you want the educators to maintain control over which classes get turned into teams, or if you want the district to have that control for you. Now that brings me to some of the releases we're doing in August. We're enhancing and we're improving the educator-led team creation flow. This new process is going to allow the teachers and educators to create the classes they need and minimize the number of extraneous created classes and additional steps on their part. We're reducing the number of clicks so they don't have to go through a full flow and have to have a workbook put in front of them so they understand how to do this process. IT admins can still use SDS to create the groups for each class, but now the educators will have a greater control over which ones get turned into teams. And we have a nice little UI interface to help them out with that. And of course, we have new people and group membership viewer offering greater details for the IT admins over which users are in which groups, and in that new user hierarchy that we're offering in our V2 release. We have some great API updates that we're doing to Graph for class provisioning. So for those of you that are wanting to do some unique class provisioning that can circumvent the educators having to activate the class teams for the students to get in, these new features will be available for you. We have some grade sync updates where we're going to be expanding the different providers that can utilize grade sync. We're making our sync status a little bit more user friendly. That's been a big feedback I've heard the last few months, is that when we say that the sync is running, what does that actually mean? We're going to give you greater details there. And then also just more enhanced back to school monitoring for you and your organization. Now, I want to go over to some of the resources. I have a huge deck here that, like I said, I'm going to give you guys all access to this to look at a little bit later. But this is the resource page that I mentioned that I want everybody to have access to. We operate in a mode of transparency. We don't have a hidden playbook for SDS. So all of our resources, all of our documentation, all of our best practices, they're publicly available. All of our PowerShell scripts, they're open on GitHub for you to review and modify as need be. So I want to make sure that you all have access to this. If you have trouble sleeping later, feel free to open up one of the large docs page and it will knock you out. It's very technically written and driven, so feel free to go after that. But then I also wanted to make sure that you have a point of contact for SDS for onboarding assistance. We have a couple AKAs that you can go to, aka.ms/SDS signup. That's how you can reach the onboarding team. They'll provide that hand-in-hand white glove assistance through the entirety of the deployment process. I will note that you do need to have a global admin available to make SDS work or to go through the process of modifying any of your existing profiles. And if you already have SDS in place and you just want some support or some assistance as you're doing your own back to school cleanup, we have a aka.ms/SDS support to assist you there. And then, of course, I always like to hear feedback on our products and our services. So we have a user voice available to submit and vote on your ideas. A lot of what we generated for July and August here came from the user voice that we heard over the last several months. The voting option within that system also allows us to help provide weight on which projects or which items need to have a priority. So feel free to utilize that service as well. In the hopes of maintaining at least 10 minutes for open Q&A, I can go ahead and stop now unless you would like me to go into some of the features about the V2 file format. Does anybody want to see that?
Yeah, well, let's do, if it's okay, let's do a couple of the questions so that we can get into that and then maybe circle back. And I'm glad that you called out the user voice. I think we've said it repeatedly on this call, but they do genuinely listen. The user voice teams for all the different products do actually look at that. So please make sure that you do vote or submit ideas on there. The question that came up, you may or may not have been on the call, but when we were talking about things in the first section, and then the question came up that is, what happens when a student's schedule changes in relationship to SDS? Do grades, assignments, the notebook, do they shift? What goes on with their content from one class as they shift into another class?
Great question. So that user's details, that those assignments, those grades, they actually stay within the class itself. So the teacher can review them, even if, let's say, John or Cindy was moved from Math 101, they go to Geometry. All the work that they had, all the grades that were approved and submitted will stay within the class themselves.
Okay, so that stuff stays where it was, and then it would start fresh for them in their new class.
Yes.
Okay.
So when you move a user, that's a good point I like to highlight. When we move users, either directly in the Teams application, or if you modify users' enrollments with SDS, it does not delete that data. That data is still residing within that class team. That's a big concern that a lot of folks have is, will SDS delete everything that we did if we shift a student from one class to the next? No, it does not. In fact, that's one of the features that we put into our system is we do not inherently directly delete users, groups, or any content that was created. We do have PowerShell scripts that can empower you to do that, but we don't make it easy for you to just hit the delete button by accident.
Perfect. And so circling back to the integrations, one of the ones that I know was big for me and my customers here in Georgia was Infinite Campus, but we have some questions about some other future integrations potentially. So what about PeopleSoft, Campus Solutions, Banner, Illusion Colleague, any of those that are potentially on the upcoming list of supported integrations?
There's actually a lot more than what I've listed here. I've only taken a couple that I usually highlight here, also because I'm working with them and I wanted to make sure I had the right logo. We have dozens of partners that are utilizing the IMS Global One Roster standard to sync with us. Okay. And they can certainly go ahead and provide that option. We actually offer a generic One Roster sync. What I would recommend for anybody that's curious if their partner or their SIS is providing this service, have them reach out to us directly. We have a partner sign up on that same link I showed earlier, aka.sds sign up, where partners can work with our integration engineers to ensure that we can get them branded and noted directly within the SDS portal. Otherwise, if your SIS provider wanted to, they can go and implement the endpoints that are required for SDS. Again, we make that publicly available. It's not hidden anywhere. There's about 3 dozen endpoints that they need to ensure are connected. And then you could go through the generic API connector with a secret ID, a client, and a username and a password, and connect that SIS provider to SDS. But I would recommend having them work hand in hand with our integration engineers to make sure that we validated their tests, we provided some post-man collection validation, and that we can also get them branded here. And awesome. That is at no cost to them or to you or anybody.
No cost is always something people like to hear, especially in education. In addition to sharing a link in the community channel, we will get that over to the community call channel. Sorry, in the chat, we'll get it in the call channel. Jeffrey would also like to apologize for accidentally muting you. It was really his cat. So apologies from Jeffrey's cat for muting you.
A sworn enemy at this time, Jeffrey's cat. I will find you.
I'm going to pop over. We have a hand in the air, so I'll pop there and then come back to the chat pane here. But Ryan, if you'd like to come off of mute and ask your question.
Yeah, so one question, 2 questions. One on One Roster CSVs.
Yes.
Are One Roster CSVs still going to be supported, because looking actually just earlier this week at the documentation, the only mentioning of the one roster CSVs is using the school data sync toolkit, which every page on there has a big disclaimer saying the toolkit is soon to be deprecated. Don't use this anymore.
Oh, yep, that's a great piece of feedback. So I'm actually going through the docs page, through our publishing arm, and I'm going to note that we are probably going to extend the life a little bit longer. The toolkit is still in use. I actually have a couple ministries in full countries that are utilizing the toolkit, and some partners that have leveraged it and made it their own. So while you see a banner that says it's deprecated, we're not going to cut it or get rid of it. You know, it's still going to be available. We still want to make sure that people can use this tool. We're just not going to continue to improve upon it, if that makes sense. As far as
so
the one
if you
roster,
have any,
go ahead.
Okay, so like right now, I'm currently trying to get our one roster CSVs into school data sync, and the toolkit keeps on throwing all types of errors that do not really lead me down any paths that make any sense. Just sort of generic parsing errors. So based on what you said, there's not really going to be any updates to the toolkit either that are going to make those errors clear for me to find out what the issue with our one roster CSVs are.
What I would ask is, I also run our support arm of our business for SDS. So if you go to that AKA, that's going to notify my neighbor down the block here, as we're all kind of locally situated here up in the Dakotas. If you could submit that with a screenshot, I'm going to have one of my team members reach out to you directly so that we can troubleshoot that. But otherwise, the 7 one roster 1.0 CSV files, you shouldn't have to modify them. There's an actual option in the tools to the profile when you create it to ingest it and run through the pre-validation. I'm curious if maybe that is what's catching us with some of the files. Maybe there's a schema change that's not being reflected in your file, or vice versa. So if you could submit a ticket directly and say, talk to Ben during the office hours, I need to have SDS assistance with this, I'll make sure it gets priority.
Okay. Yeah, and then the other question is, so I work at a BOCES here in New York State, and we work with, in addition to having our own teachers and students, we also work with many school districts in the area. And one of our school districts is very heavy Microsoft school. Most of the other districts we work with are mostly Google, to my dismay, unfortunately. But this one school district has one teacher that is almost daily asking us, is GradeSync coming? Is GradeSync coming? They're using eSchool data. Is that going to be on its way soon?
Great question. So some of the things that we're doing with the GradeSync, and you actually, I wanted to highlight this. We have a recent blog posting that we put up here. I'll put into the chat window. You all can see that, highlighting some of the items I talked about today. And we actually talk about the GradeSync. Is that in SDS, we're adding a new generic one roster API connection. So right now, PowerSchool and Infinite Campus have a branded option for GradeSync. We are working with the GradeSync development team to put this generic version in. So anybody that adheres to that one roster 1.1 global standard, like eSchool data does, could then start having this feature enabled within their tenant. Now, there is some additional endpoints that the partner or the SIS have to provide and enable and run some validation tests on, but that will be there.
Great.
We're looking at mid-August for that to be released, but stay tuned to our tech community blogs, our EIP community, our ERL community, and you're going to see those notices get fired up here.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, and actually, we do have more questions, but what, in the essence of time, since we are here At the top of the hour, what we'll make sure to do is get Ben these questions, or Ben, if you have access to the chat and you want to put them in there, but we will make sure that the community channel sees them as well. The link for this has been, the blog that Ben just shared is actually, we have shared it in the chat. For the community call, we have shared it in the community call channel, so you have the link in both places, but we will make sure to get Ben these questions that are remaining so that everybody can feel successful with SDS. And Ben has promised to get us that deck with all those links, especially the ones that are going to help us sleep at night. So thank you, Ben, for being here. Dave, I see you've come off of mute. Hope the driving's still going well.
I pulled over. It's raining like crazy. And anyways, I was too much multitasking. Ben, really appreciate you coming on today. And any questions we can help answer would be awesome. We'll either forward those to you from the chat, or if you want to just reply directly in the chat. And, you know, if there's any future slides that you would like us to highlight as part of that deck, also, we'll call those out as well.
Thank you. Happy to help whenever.
Yep, great conversation, great questions. Thank you guys all so much for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you next week. Remember, our topic is Power BI and how it's being used in one of our K-12 systems here in Georgia to inform some decision making. So with that, I will go ahead and stop our recording and transcription.